let's look at a survey on financial inclusion by A2F. It's obviously for 2023. See what they tell us, or what it tells us about especially gender recommendation and gender inclusion in Africa. We are going to speak with Chinasa Collins-Ogbo. She's the head of Inclusion for All in EFINA. Hi, Chinasa. Good afternoon. Hi, Chinasa. Good afternoon.
Hi, Amy. Good afternoon.
Yeah, good to be speaking with you and talking about financial inclusion, gender inclusion, and all of this. We seem in Nigeria to be so hit by high cost of living now that one might even ask, do we need to be discussing issues of financial inclusion at this time? How important is it in the midst of this high cost of living?
Fantastic. And I think that, you've asked the question the right way, because when we start to talk about financial inclusion in light of, the current economic conditions, it may seem far removed from people's realities. But what I'd like to start with first is give a quick definition of what financial inclusion is in the Nigerian context. So it's basically an outcome that means that all Nigerians have access and use a broad range of financial services that meet their needs at an affordable cost. So if you start to think of savings accounts, insurance products, pension products, basically tailored to meet the different needs of different segments within the society. And so we continue to advocate for financial inclusion because it's a lifeline for people. It's actually a resource that people can depend on to build their resilience in the event of shocks. Now, coming to your specific question about the current high cost of living and what that means for financial inclusion, we know that there's a direct correlation, right, between financial health and financial inclusion. So financial health is just basically how an individual is able to cope when there's shocks in the economy. How are they able to cope and weather the storm, if you like? And what we find is the people who are financially included, the people who have bank accounts, who are banked and use a range of financial service products, have higher financial health, which means that they have more resilience in the face of these challenges. Now, in the 2023 A2F survey, which you referred to, one of the top barriers that we identified as one of the top barriers to opening a bank account or even being financially included is little to irregular income. So just basically people saying that I don't have enough money to even start to think of a bank account or even start to think of other financial service products, right? And we also know that there's a strong correlation between poverty and financial inclusion. So the poorer people are less likely to have bank accounts or to be formally financially included. So high cost of living just basically means that you have lower disposable income and your priorities change. You start to think of the most basic needs. You're not thinking of having a bank account or thinking of the complex savings financial service products that we're talking about that helps you build resilience. So people right now are just focusing on their basic needs, on the things that they need to survive. It's basically survival of the fittest. However, the people who are included are less at risk of the shocks because they have savings, they have investments to fall back on. They have all these support systems in place within the formal financial services that helps them deal better with these shocks. So in terms of high cost of living and the relation to financial inclusion, our goal is to make sure that people start to see how financial inclusion is actually an enabler for them in terms of being more resilient in the events of these shocks in the economy and how to build better for the future, basically.
Yeah, I bet a lot of people will want you to do more explanation. I just want to survive. Can I just eat and sleep for today? But I mean, the survey also shows that there's been improvement. It says nearly 3 in 4 adult Nigerians are financially included. And that's when we compare 2020 till 2023, which is the focus of the survey. That's good news. But do we know the drivers?
Yes, Sini, we do know the drivers. And let me start by saying that, there are a number of drivers, but the primary driver, I dare say, is the regulatory environment. We've had a relatively nimble regulatory system that has actually then created an enabling environment by evolving with critical trends that can accelerate financial inclusion. So what that basically means is the regulators over time, given an example, when I started banking, my banking career, and when the whole financial inclusion issue started with, trying to bank the underbanked, the regulatory environment was not ready for it. We didn't even have KYC requirements that spoke to the sub-segments that we were targeting, which are the poorest of the poor, who don't have formal ID, etc. So we've had an evolution in the regulatory environment that has then created one of the specific or a couple of the specific drivers for the outcomes we saw in 2023 with the A2F survey. So with that enabling regulatory environments, we have fintechs that counts for a significant proportion of the growth in formal financial inclusion. So we saw that in 2023, 12% were primarily driven by non-banking channels, so the fintechs, the mobile service agents, and that's from a 5% base in 2020. For instance, the non-bank players, the fintechs particularly, were responsible for 90% of the 64% formal inclusion that we recorded in 2023. You can use an example of Paga, for instance, that has over 19 million users. Paga is one of the fintechs that, have benefited from a regulatory environment that's enabling. We also have the adoption of financial service agents, so what you know as the mobile banking agents, who recorded an extraordinary increase from 4.4% in 2020 to 54% in 2023. Benefiting about 11 million financially excluded people in Nigeria. And this is also a fallout of one of the initiatives of the Central Bank of Nigeria. So talking about regulatory environments being enabling, the shared agent network expansion facilities, right, is an initiative of the CBN that has basically driven this growth in terms of agent networks and alternative banking channels that are non-banking to drive financial inclusion.
So we know that in Nigeria, we largely have an informal economy. And I guess that's why one of the drivers of that, it will be the non-bank formal services. We now use USSD, you don't need to have internet and things like that. But have we explored that enough? And then can we look at some of the risks, the challenges, issue of fraud, issue of poor service, issue of infrastructure, charges, sometimes you get charges on your phone and you're wondering, that can be a discouraging factor for a lot of people, so
yes.
Have we explored this area enough to make it safe to get the trust of the majority in the informal sector?
Fantastic question, Ini. And just to speak to whether we've explored it enough, I think that it's work in progress. We're continuing to improve upon it. And I think as you know, with anything that's innovative, the other side of it are the risks and challenges that arise with that. And so when I talk about the nimble regulatory environment, it's also testing and learning and taking from those learnings and improving and building around some of those challenges. Now, speaking specifically to the impact of fraudulent activities and all the challenges that come with banking using formal channels or digital channels, we know that it has a huge impact on levels of trust, and trust is a very key ingredient, if you know, of playing in the financial service system or participating in that system, because you're essentially saying, if I give you my money, I trust that it's safe with you and I can get it when I want it and without any challenges. My money is safe. That's what we're preaching, and that's what the whole essence of trying to get people to bank in the formal financial services system is about. However, I can give you also some of the data, from the A2F survey. So we know that about 52% of Nigerians from that survey highlighted that information on financial products and services are not easily understandable. So that's the challenge of making sure that service providers are very intentional about how they communicate with their different segments. So you have to understand that different segments speak different languages, and how are you ensuring that they're getting information that they need to get to continue to strengthen their trust in your system. Another 37% are not satisfied with the customer support, and then another 19%, talk about bank platforms always being down. So even you and I know that if my banking app is down, I can get a bit flustered. So imagine someone in hard to reach rural community that doesn't even know what's going on. You imagine what that can do to their psyche and the level of trust, right? So trust is a very key element. And one of the ways that I believe the regulators are ensuring that this trust does not get further eroded and they ensure that the interests of the consumers are well protected is to the CBN's Consumer Protection Department, continually developing frameworks and policies to ensure that financial service providers are being responsible and are being intentional in how they're ensuring that nobody gets left behind in terms of information that is being given. There's transparency, and there's also taking into consideration solutions that can actually further exclude people. So you talked about cost. One of the key barriers to financial inclusion is cost of banking. People in rural communities will talk about charges they're not even aware of, that they don't understand, that they keep debiting from their account. So all of these things are definitely issues, but there's also the efforts on the regulatory side to ensure that these activities and these practices are well monitored and are responsibly delivered, basically, to make sure that the trust that has been generated already or developed does not get further eroded.
Yeah. Well, just briefly now, Chinasa, we saw an improvement between 2020 and 2023. Do you see an improvement in 2024? Do you think that this high cost of living will discourage, further growth of financial inclusion in Nigeria?
So when I talked about the high cost of living, I talked about the correlation between financial health and financial inclusion, which is just basically how healthy are you when there are shocks. And, high cost of living is one of the economic shocks that we're experiencing right now, right? And so if we're able to get people to see that getting banked in the formal system or moving into the formal financial system is actually for their own good and actually protects them from the challenges and the outcomes of economic shocks, then I think we'll see an improvement. But then we need to get people to a point where their trust is strengthened, and that can look like ensuring that the key players on the supply side are doing the right thing. Developing the right products that meet the needs of these segments of people, ensuring that from the regulatory side, certain regulations are put in place that definitely protects the interest of the consumer, and they don't get disenfranchised basically by the system. So specifically to your question, I'd say I am positive that we can see an improvement, just ensuring that we get people to understand what it means for them, basically sharing what the value proposition is of being financially included and demonstrating through the experiences and outcomes or lived experiences of people like them.
All right, Chinasa, well, we do hope activities such as the one, today is the deadline, linking your NIN and your BVN and all of that.
Yes.
And those, we hope that will not come as another discouraging factor. But thank you so much, Chinasa Collins.
Can I comment on that very quickly?
Okay, yeah, real quick, we're out of time.
I want to very quickly. So you know what I totally agree where there's a threat of further exclusion if it's not done properly. But ensuring your NIN is linked to your SIM and requiring NIN is also another protective layer to ensure that fraudulent activities don't continue and affect consumers. So what we are advocating for at EFINA is to see how the regulators can think of the people who are going to be further excluded if the deadline is still in the timeline that they've given, which we think is too short. It's a welcome policy, but done in the right time, it will be better. If not, then yes, we do face the risk of further exclusion.
Yeah, well, I guess there'll never be a right time. We Nigerians always wait for the for the dying minute. But
there are also ways of ensuring that certain things are in place. So the infrastructural gaps that are no fault. It's not the fault of the people. It's things that have to happen on the supply side. Having that readiness to ensure that what you're asking for is actually achievable realistically.
All right, Chinasa, we really have to stop there. Thank you so much. Chinasa Collins, so go head of Inclusion for All, EFINA.
Thank you.